Right now, the Oilers, they're simply just collecting dubs, collecting wins. 15-3-1 in their last 19. Jamie McLennan joins us on the show right now. Noodles, good morning. Where are you today? Are you in a hotel? Where are you this morning?
Yes, I'm not in witness protection program. I am in Detroit, Michigan. I called the game last night, and my flight is delayed, so I'm actually going to head to the airport after we chat. So it's good. I got a chance to call that Ottawa-Detroit game last night, but I also got a chance to watch the Boston-Edmonton game, which was good. Honestly, two things that I got out of that before you asked me a question is Edmonton's certainly rolling, and Boston is certainly reeling. That's the two takeaways I got out of it. Boston's really struggling to find offense. I looked even at the analytics last night. I don't know if you guys saw it, but Edmonton created 25 high-danger chances. I mean, that's a team that's certainly feeling it offensively, but Boston is finding – they haven't found their groove. If anything, they've found their groove in a negative way, and Edmonton really exposed it last night.
Yeah, if it wasn't for Swayman last night, I mean, it's 7-8-0. Yeah. Like it could have been. It could have been that level. Like for the Bruins, especially with the way some of these other teams behind them are playing right now, would you be legitimately concerned about the playoffs if you're a Bruins fan right now?
You should have to be. That being said, if you look at some of their moves in the offseason, Lindholm hasn't settled in. I watched him play live against the Leafs the other night. Like, he was a non-factor. Zadorov, big signing, big, strong defenseman, very tough to play against. But people realize why other organizations were willing to move away from him. He wanted too much money for where he should play in the lineup. And some of their current players, the guys that are on the roster, aren't playing up to their capability. Brad Marchand looks his age. I'll just be honest. I mean, that's the one thing that I've noticed about. He's still got the drive and the work ethic, but people forget he's 36 years old and he had 3 surgeries in the off season. So this is a guy that is really trying to push this team through. So I look at it, and Boston is, I wouldn't say underachieved, but they're going to be in one. And to your point, they should be concerned because there are some teams that are really pushing, including Ottawa and Detroit, both the teams that I watched last night. Detroit's won 5 in a row with Todd McLellan driving the bus. And, Ottawa just come off a 9-game road trip at 4-4-1 without their number one goaltender. So I think they're hanging in there.
Well, Noodles, you mentioned those two teams last night, and specifically Detroit off the Todd bump as of late, 5 in a row. Another one of those teams, though, that the Oilers get tomorrow in the Pittsburgh Penguins, just looking, 500 over the last 10. Their goal differential, also like the Bruins, just deep in the red. Should it be another easy night again for the Oilers tomorrow in Pittsburgh? And out of this collection of teams chasing Boston, do you see them as more, on the ascendancy or continuing to kind of go fade and go down as we make our way through into the spring?
I don't think Sidney Crosby is going to allow them fade away. I just knowing his character, knowing his drive, I just don't know if they have enough to get it over the line. On paper, it's a Hall of Fame. You've got the Malkin and Letang, and to me, there's guys that should be able to do it. But at the end of the day, age has caught up to them. I think some of the moves that Jimmy Rutherford had to do at the deadline to double and triple down to add to back-to-back cups has caught up with them. And that's why Kyle Dubas signed a 7-year deal. The first couple of years, he was going to try and push for the playoffs. And then at some point, he's going to have a tear-down rebuild. So I think Pittsburgh's going to be right there. That being said, the worst thing you can do is take a team lightly in this league, because even the bottom feeder teams can beat you if you're not prepared to play on any given night. And, Edmonton's a team, and we know it. We've watched them every night. Sometimes they just wade their way into a game and see how it's going to unfold. They mirror the attitude and composure of Bouchard some nights where it's like, let's see how this unfolds. And I'm going to try that play. Oh, that didn't work? Oh, okay. Well, it happens. But Edmonton is rolling. I like that some of their depth guys are chipping in now as well. We're not just looking at the score sheet and going, okay, it's 29. That's just dragged them through the war, and 97. You're seeing the Henriques start to finish some of the chances. I mean, that's the one guy I circled. Henriques had a lot of chances this year where he just hasn't scored. where it's nice that he gets a couple, and the bottom of your roster looks dangerous, because that's what you're going to need down the stretch.
Well, that's where we wanted. We were talking about Henrique a lot yesterday.
We woke him up,
prior to yesterday's game, only Derek Ryan had a lower points per game among forwards this season. But he was shooting at like 5.2%, which comes back around to what you were saying, and that he's had a lot of chances, hasn't buried. Yesterday, they put together that line of Henrique, Skinner, and Hyman. Henrique ends up with a couple of goals. What do you think about that line moving forward, at least for a little bit? I think when the going gets tough, Hyman ends up back, somewhere in the top 6. But what do you think of that group?
I mean, the outlier is Hyman, and what's impressive, anytime you put him on that line, all of a sudden you got a chance to have some offense, because he goes and gets the puck, and he's hard to get the puck off of. So if you're Henrique, you go to the front of the net. You go to areas where you can get the puck, because Hyman will create some work. I thought Skinner had some really nice looks and some nice plays where Skinner is starting to settle in. And I know that's a real hot button topic in Edmonton, where does he fit in the lineup? This isn't the 26-year-old Jeff Skinner. You have to be mindful. That's why I think it's very important to mix and match certain nights where maybe age is a factor on that given night. Let's not forget, the Edmonton Oilers, I believe, are the oldest team in the NHL, depending on who's in that night, if Derek Ryan is in or if not, right? There's a few teams that are dancing around it. But it's because there's a lot of 30-pluses on that team. So you have to find out who's going that night and reward them with that ice time. But I do like that Hyman's there just to help out. But I also would like to see Hyman continue to get on that role. Like, it was nice when he was scoring, because it's good for the team, because he's a guy that is a warrior. He could have easily put up his hand and said, check, please, with the nose injury, and he could have been out for 6 weeks. Instead, he's playing through with a bug shield, and every time you look at him, it's still painful to just see his face. And I'm sitting on my couch watching it.
Jamie McLennan with us on the show this morning, brought to you by Pro-Am Sports. It was a shared shutout for Pickard and Skinner last night. Skinner had to come out of the game after Zadorov went hard to the net and blew him up. I know there was a talking point last night on the post-game show here on Edmonton Sports Talk this morning as well. Should there have been more of a response from the Oilers to Zadorov? Was the penalty called right? Your thoughts on how all of that unfolded last night, Noodles?
Yeah, anytime, this is the one thing, and I'm going to knock on wood, because Stuart Skinner has been an absolute rock in the net. Regardless of, how you feel about his play certain nights. He played in 82 games last year total with the playoffs, 23 and 59. Now, this is a guy who has been steady. So for him to come out of the game, it is concerning, and based on the nature of how it unfolded. I always want to see a response based on, the goaltender. Now, that being said, I saw it the other night in Toronto. Jake McCabe comes to the rescue of his goaltender, and then Garnet Hathaway knocks him out, and McCabe is going to be out probably for a little bit. So, there is that fine line, gray area, but it is because of the player. It's Zadorov. Zadorov's known as a gray area player. Listen, Corey Perry drops the gloves. Like there's guys that are capable of it, but I did see something. I think it was a stat on Instagram last night saying that the Oilers aren't a very physical team. I think they're lowest in the NHL for hits. And,
they don't hit.
They aren't a team that's known to be mean. They'll outskill you, they'll outskate you, they do all of that type of stuff. That's why it'll be interesting to see what management does at the deadline. A guy, and I'm not going to start a rumor, so I'm just going to speak my mind here, if you don't mind. So let's not radio me or do whatever. The headline, McLennan says this. But I think the Oilers should be circling a guy like Jacob Trouba and saying, you know what, that guy's a bastard to play against. And I'm saying that in a positive way. Mean. He would add to the size of that back end. And you can't tell me that Pat Verbeek didn't talk to Jacob Trouba when he traded for him and said, I'm going to probably flip you at the deadline. And if Anaheim, and listen, they're going to have lots of takers. Because if Anaheim decides to make him a $4 million defenseman, if they decided to chew on half his salary and you get him for this year, this playoff run and next year, that would be a very attractive defenseman that could go up and down and play in that probably 4 or 5 spot. But to me, I look at that, and that's what that would add is to your team toughness, because you need somebody that Zadorov looks over his shoulder and says, okay, that guy's coming, because but he needs to be able to play. He can't.
I was going to say,
I
was going to say, so Josh Brown isn't that guy who was in the lineup last night, right? Like,
yeah, Josh Brown is a low minute guy. He's a 7-8, if you ask me, and I'm not being disrespectful for him. That's just where he is.
That's who he is. Yep.
So he's certainly tough as nails. He is a heavyweight, and I like him. But I go farther up, and I say, if I'm looking at the nature of this team trying to go deep into the playoffs, you need somebody who's an impact guy in that 4 spot. And I think you might be shooting higher as far as skill level, all of that. I mean, they hit it out of the park when they got Ekholm. I'm sure there's other players that they're circling on teams that are struggling. But I look at it. I think Brown is a guy who adds that physicality. But I also think that, you need somebody who can organically have that and still be an everyday 15 to 17 minute contributor.
Noodles, before we let you go, you mentioned you did call that Detroit-Ottawa game last night, a game that had that one save I was talking about being described on Twitter as grand larceny, which I love when I see a grand larceny anywhere. But that was a big game for both those teams. They're both hunting right around a playoff spot right there in the thick of it with the surprising recently Montreal Canadiens. But you did mention Todd McLellan, and Detroit's now won 5 in a row. Do they look like a different team?
They do. Their morning skate was up tempo. Guys were joking around, having fun. I think sometimes, that new coach bump is just cold water in your face going, smarten up and take a look at your own game. All of a sudden, Patty Kane's dancing last night, scores the OT winner. Raymond and Sider and the spine. I always say the spine of the team, right? Your star players, it's no shock that they've had a resurgence when the guys who are producing are your top players. And it's a top player league. If you have a team that's going through a tough stretch, I would circle the top of the roster and say, what is their production level? That's really what I'd be looking at. And Detroit didn't have production from a lot of their players. All of a sudden, DeBrincat, Raymond, Sider, Kane, Larkin, all of a sudden they're producing. Guess what? They're getting wins. So it was a playoff feel. I was glad that both teams got points because it deserved an overtime feel to it. And that, you're right, that save by Forsberg on Kasper was one of the best saves I've seen this season. It was impressive.
Yeah, that was pretty fun to watch. Noodle, safe travels home today, buddy, and we'll catch up next week.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
There you go. That's Jamie McLennan, brought to you by Pro-Am Sports.